consideration for a while now. But I think same as the Surgeon General pick, you're hearing some cautious optimism from the public health world based on things he's said in the past, based on his support. He is self-identified as being pro-vaccine, and so there is, sort of hope from the public health community that he will be somewhat of a, counter to the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Vaccine skepticism wing that is emerging in this administration. But again, everyone serves at the pleasure of the president, and so it'll really be what the tone is coming from the top that will dictate a lot of things going forward.
Then there's Dave Weldon, the former Republican congressman. He's staunchly anti-abortion, skeptical of vaccines, has pushed the debunked idea that preservatives in vaccines cause autism, and he's going to potentially soon be leading the CDC, which is now has to be confirmed by the Senate. Does he fit into a pattern here when it comes to Trump's picks to shape the country's health policy and public health?
Yeah, so I think, even though these folks are ideologically a little bit all over the place, there are some themes that are emerging. And one of the themes that is alarming people is that these folks don't have experience running big bureaucracies, which, of course, there are tens of thousands of employees at these different agencies. And so that's why in the past, you've had governors or people with previous federal government experience doing this. It's not an easy job. And so even though you have medical experience, or like Weldon, you have served on committees that oversee these agencies, that is important, but they're alarmed not only by some of the views he has expressed. I mean, he's not only questioned vaccine safety when it comes to things like COVID, but also, regular childhood vaccines, the MMR vaccines. He's questioned the HPV vaccine. And so this is really alarming lawmakers and people in the public health world, in addition to this sort of lack of executive experience.
Speaking of MMR disease, all three of these nominees will be big figures in informing Americans about public health. Trump's picks have spread vaccine misinformation, even though the data is overwhelming here in terms of the effectiveness. When you compare the cases of major disease annually in the U.S. before measles, mumps, whooping cough vaccines to now when they're more widely available, almost in some cases 99 to 100% drop in terms of cases annually. So what impact will all three of these people potentially have on public health?
It could be huge. I mean, we already have public health experts worried about the worst case scenario, which is basically what we saw during COVID-19, which was a lot of people who didn't need to get sick and die, getting sick and dying. And so, I mean, that could happen in terms of a new outbreak, like we're seeing these cases of bird flu that are very troubling, but that could also happen with a resurgence of some of these diseases that we made so much progress on over the past several decades. We could really see that backtrack.
Alice Miranda Olstein, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Outside of those top public health roles, a flurry of new nominees are rounding out Trump's administration. Today, President-elect Trump named Brooke Rollins as his pick for Agriculture Secretary. Rollins is the president and CEO of the America First Policy Institute, a Trump-aligned think tank. In the first Trump administration, she served on his Domestic Policy Council. The president-elect's choice for the Office of Management and Budget is a familiar name. Russell Vought led the Budget Office during the first Trump term. Vought was one of the lead authors of Project 2025, the conservative playbook that proposed dramatic plans to overhaul and gut parts of the government. Vought has said the U.S. is living in a, quote, post-constitutional time, and he crafted plans for Trump to deploy the military during civil unrest. Sebastian Gorka has been named White House Senior Director for Counterterrorism. Gorka became a Fox News contributor after an abrupt end to his brief stint in the White House during Trump's first administration. In response to the announcement, Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, told CNN he's a dangerous choice.
Well, Sebastian Gorka is a con man. I wouldn't have him in any U.S. government. Fortunately, it's not the highest position he had been mentioned for, but I don't think it's going to bode well for counterterrorism efforts.
President-elect Trump also announced his picks for the Departments of Labor and Housing and Urban Development. Labor Secretary nominee Lori Chavez-DeRemer, who recently lost her re-election bid to the House, is backed by labor unions, including the head of the Teamsters. And former Texas State Representative, professional football player, and Trump White House alum Scott Turner has been tapped for HUD Secretary. In the Middle East, deadly airstrikes killed 6 people, mostly women and children, in the southern area of Khan Yunis. Gaza's health ministry said the death toll from the 13th month-long war has ticked past 44,000. The health ministry does not distinguish between fighters and civilians. And in Lebanon, an Israeli airstrike killed more than a dozen people in Beirut. Lebanese health officials say the strikes hit the central part of the capital, killing 15 and wounding more than 60 others, when an 8-story building came crashing down. And in California, the CDC is investigating the country's first case of bird flu diagnosed in a child. The health agency says the child has mild symptoms and is recovering. An investigation into how they contracted the virus is underway, but officials say the child may have had contact with wild birds. No other cases involving children have been announced. Still to come on PBS News Weekend, why decades-old toxic foam is still contaminating waterways in northern Michigan, and the long-term impact major storms can have on children's mental health.